Alright, so we're going to start down here with the example today, and we're going to use the same equation, x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0, and we're going to solve it using 4 different methods. So remember, when you're solving by graphing, you want to make sure that it's equal to 0, and that's actually important for all 4 of these different methods. You always want to make sure your equation is set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, you're going to have to set it equal to 0. So this one already is, as you can see, and we're going to solve it by graphing. So ask yourself, when you're graphing a quadratic equation, to find the solutions, what part of the graph are you looking at? Hopefully, you know to look for x-intercepts. So let's go ahead and graph this on the coordinate plane to our right. And again, you should be going to y equals on your calculator and plugging that in, and then going to the table to get the points. And then for your solutions, you're looking at the graph and paying close attention to where the graph is crossing the x-axis. That's the horizontal one, the x-axis. And you can see that this graph crosses through at the point -3, 0. And then again at the point -1, 0. Okay? So our answers, or our solutions, are going to be x equals, and then you're going to use these braces, -3 and -1. Now we're going to look at how you can trace these on your calculator. So we're going to go to y equals again. If you use this to graph it, you should already have x squared plus 4x plus 3. We're going to graph it. And now we're going to learn how to trace the solutions on our calculator. So we're still looking at the x-intercepts. And I want to show you that you can actually see them on this problem in particular. There you have the point -1, 0, and then there's a point -3, 0. So again, your solutions are x equals -3 and x equals -1. But let's say that you could see the x-intercepts on the graph, and you couldn't see the x values where y is 0 on your table. That would be in a case where your solutions are not integers, so they'd be decimals, and in that case you'd have to trace. I'm going to use this problem and trace it anyway, just to show you that it works. But we're going to get the same answers that we got by graphing. We're going to get -3 and -1. So again, you hit second and trace on your calculator, and then you're going to choose number 2 for 0, because 0 is another word for solution, or x-intercept. And let's find the solution on the left first. So here it is, and the calculator is saying left bound. So we're going to move that cursor all the way over till it's just to the left of that point. So that's pretty good. That's a good place to stop. And then you're going to hit enter. Then it says right bound. So now you're going to use the right key, and you're going to go just to the right of that spot. So that's a good spot. Then when it says guess, you can move it a little closer to the x-axis. You hit enter, and what do you know? -3, 0. All right. You probably already know what our other answer is going to be, but let's, for practice sake, let's do it again. So you're going to do second, trace, 0. Now we're looking for the next x-intercept. So the calculator is saying left bound. We're going to move it a little bit closer though. So I'm moving it right till it's just to the left of that spot. That's a good place to stop. You hit enter, and then you're going to move it just to the right. So we're going to move it just above the x-axis this time, and hit enter. And then we're going to go back to that x-intercept and hit enter, and check it out. It says x equals -1 when y is 0. So that's how you can do it on your calculator. And remember factoring from last unit? Factoring is another way that you can solve a quadratic equation. So this is my least preferred method, but on the SOL you might be asked to answer a question that's related to solving by factoring. So I want you to know what to look for. So we've seen trinomials like x squared plus 4x plus 3 plenty of times, and we factored them last unit. If you remember a trinomial, like, whoops, let me fix that. A trinomial like x squared plus 4x plus 3 will factor to be a binomial times a binomial. And you can use y equals also. We know that we're going to have x and x, right? So we're going to factor this problem. You go to y equals and you put 3 over x and then 3 over x plus x to get the two numbers you're looking for, okay? So your numbers should be plus 3 and plus 1, all right? The only difference is we're setting it equal to 0, and then you're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So the first factor is x plus 3. So you're going to set it equal to 0, and you're going to solve. What do? You subtract 3, and you get x equals negative 3. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Whoops, negative 3. So that's, again, one of our solutions. And then you're going to set x plus 1 equals 0. Solve that. And what do? You get x equals negative 1. So your solutions, again, are x equals negative 3 and negative 1. All right. The last method that we're going to look at is the quadratic formula. It's not a formula that you have to memorize, and it's probably one that you're not going to have to use that often. But the nice thing about it is that it always works. And sometimes when we get into imaginary solutions, it's going to be your only choice. However, you don't have to memorize it, and it's pretty easy to use, really, because you're just plugging in. The most challenging part is probably identifying what A, B, and C are. And again, you also want to make sure that the equation is equal to 0, which it is. So in standard form of a quadratic equation, you have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So take a look at that, and then take a look at our original problem, x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0, and try and determine what A, B, and C are. A is going to be equal to 1 because there's no coefficient for x squared. You don't see it, right? So the coefficient is 1. B is a little more obvious. It's 4. And C is 3. So what you're going to do is plug them in to this formula here. Wherever you see a B, you're going to put a 4. So we're going to have x equals negative 4. This means plus or minus, and we'll talk more about that in a second. The square root of b squared, it's going to be 4 squared, minus 4ac. So that's going to be minus 4 times 1 times 3. All over 2a, so that's going to be 2 times 1. All right? I would simplify that inside part of the radical, which we're going to learn is called the discriminant, but at least try and understand how we got to this point by plugging in. And now the plus or minus sign just means that we're going to separate this into two problems. We're going to do x equals negative 4 plus the square root of 4 is 2. And we're going to divide it by 2. So negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 over 2 equals negative 1. And then we're also, because there's a plus or minus sign, we're also going to do negative 4 minus 2, because, again, the square root of 4 is 2, divided by 2. And And this time we're going to get negative 4 minus 2, that's negative 6 over 2, you get negative 3. So again, your answers are negative 3 and negative 1. So take your pick. On the test, you can use any 4 of these methods. I just want you guys to see that you get the same answer regardless of which method you choose. So it's nice to have different choices when you're solving a quadratic. All right? And the question that we're going to answer here is, regardless of which method you use, what do you always need to do first when solving a quadratic equation? Set it equal to 0. How do you check your answers? Plug in. All right? Simple as that. So remember I was saying sometimes there are imaginary solutions and you have to use the quadratic formula. Well, this is one of those examples, okay? As you can see, the graph never hits the x-axis. So we say it has no real solutions. The key word there is real. If there are no real solutions, then that means there are 2 imaginary solutions, and we have to find them using the quadratic formula. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and plug this into the quadratic formula and then post the work here for you to copy down. And then we'll talk a little bit about those solutions. So I did the work over here on the left, and when we got to inside the radical, we got a negative 4 in there. And that kind of complicates things because the square root of negative 4 is 2i, right? So we can only simplify our answer as far as x equals negative 2 plus or minus I. So there are 2 solutions, but they are imaginary solutions. So we say there are 2 imaginary solutions. And we found those using the quadratic formula. The discriminant in this case was negative 4. In our previous example, the discriminant was 4, positive 4, right? So in this case, it was negative 4. So what is a discriminant? The discriminant is the number inside the radical. That b squared minus 4ac part. Whatever that number is your discriminant. And there are a few rules here. When the discriminant is positive, like in our first example, there are 2 real solutions. You can write the whole word, sorry. When the discriminant is negative, like in our previous example, there are 2 imaginary solutions. And if you ever get a problem where the discriminant is 0, that's going to be where there is 1 real solution. Okay? And there's one question on the test that deals with the discriminant and being able to tell how many solutions there are and what types there are. So try this problem down here, 2x squared minus 7x equals 4. Again, make sure that your problem's equal to 0 before you begin to do anything. And determine what the discriminant is, and then from there you should be able to tell how many solutions there are